the final kind of like look through to make sure everyone was on the bus so they could go into the next station. And lo and behold, one of their members was missing. Alice was missing. They got out her description, what she looked like. They got her clothes that she was wearing. Everyone's kind of bundled up, so they more were talking about her jacket and her pants and everything else like that. Well, Alice came back, and no one recognized her. So Alice came back from changing clothes. She just went to the bathroom, and she got a little bit hot, so she changed her whole outfit. And then when she came back, she realized everyone was looking for someone. So she joined in. So she got their description, and she said they're wearing this, and they look like this. And so Alice entered a search party for herself. And after about 3 hours, they finally said her name, and she went, "Oh, you're looking for me?" And they went, "No, we're looking for a girl who's wearing, she's got like a blue overcoat on and everything." She goes, "Oh, that's me. I just changed clothes." And a woman literally entered into a search party and found herself because those who were searching for her did not realize that Alice was standing there the whole time. Romans chapter 1. It's okay. For in the gospel, verse 17 of chapter 1, the righteousness of God is revealed. Here's this idea of revelation. Okay, the righteousness of God is revealed. There's this idea again and again in Scripture of God trying to make himself apparent and to reveal himself, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, and his divine nature are able to be clearly seen and to be understood from what has been made, so that man is without excuse. When I was growing up, the idea of believing in God, to me, was it was a foreign concept. Did I think the church was a good place? Yes. Did I think, as far as charitable organizations, they give more to the poor than anybody else? Yes, absolutely. Do I know that per capita, people who are religious tend to give more? Yeah, and you might go, well, of course, they feel like there's a big eye in the sky making them give. But by and large, those who feed the homeless are religious. Those who do this are religious. Just go look at the facts. Like, if the church stopped being the church overnight, the impoverishment and everything that happened all over, it would just ramp up exponentially. Because there's so many movements around the world that are doing it for the cause of Christ. We believe that we've been set free by grace through faith, and that it says this in the New Testament, that true religion is this, to help the widowed and the orphan, so we go out and we do. And I love that about the church. But when you wanted me to come and go, there was a God who made everything, there was a flood of the entire world, it was just, for me, it wasn't cogent. It wasn't intellectually responsible as far as it was concerned. So I started this journey. To disprove God's existence. My dad was a pastor, and really when it came down to it, there was a lot of stuff that I was doing in high school that probably wasn't good. And I knew that ultimately, if there was no God, then there was really no reason to call what I was doing bad. When I would go hang out with a girl, and then we would hook up, and then I'd go into the next person, I would lie to the first one about the second one, I knew one thing to be extremely true. If we were just bags of stardust that came into existence haphazardly, then no one existentially could say that what I was doing was wrong. Like, when comets bump into each other, we don't put them on trial. And if there's no God, then there's the meaningful things we talk about, justice, purpose, joy, love, they're really, as Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, said, we're all just people who are dancing to the tune of our DNA, and we can't even help it. In fact, we can't go outside of it. If people do the wrong thing, then they were obligated by their nature to do the wrong thing, because that's what DNA says. DNA, you just have to do what it says. But I knew there was something more going on. So I just kind of started this journey. And I felt like again and again, I would go to my church youth group, and I would say, hey, I go to school and they're talking about like evolution and that there's no way God could exist. In fact, it's laughable in the school system. But I come here and I ask you these hard questions and you throw a dodgeball at me. But would you answer my question? And they're like, not now, man. It's time for Chubby Bunny. Let's shove things in our mouth. And I was always like, but would someone please answer the question? So I kind of did my own journey to disprove God's existence. And kind of in the middle of that, where I found myself was at the feet of the throne of the King of the universe. And the reason behind it, though, it's not an intellectual endeavor, because what it's brought to me and what it might bring to you and what I hope it can bring for us is one of two things. For many of us, we have a skepticism still towards who God is or who he might be. You sit in here and you think that the biblical call is that you check your brain at the door to enter into his presence. And yet the Shema, the very framework of our whole belief system in the Old Testament, Shema Yisrael Adonai, Eloheinu Adonai Echad, this Hebrew phrase which says, listen, our God is one and he is great, and you will love him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Why would the God of the universe bring mind into the picture unless Romans 1 is correct, that he's written it all over creation? And you know what's crazy? In the year 2001, we believed that the number of things that were needed, when you look at our universe and you look at its complexity, it's a really simple equation, right? I've got a 4-year-old son. His name is Peyton. Peyton and I were walking up at Hume Lake, and up at Hume Lake, it's every summer I get a chance to go teach there, and every winter the same, and I love it up there. It's just kind of become home for us. And there's a tree when you walk down this trail, and it just says C plus R with a heart around it. And my 4-year-old said, Dad, who put that there? And I don't know the answer. I don't know who C is. I don't know who R is. The chances are they didn't really love each other, right? And it was probably like some kind of like hormonal weekend where they're like, on the last night of camp, let's kiss on the mouth. And then they just did it, right? That's just what you do, right? That's what camp's all about. But now C's probably married to J, and R's probably, I don't know. Who knows what R's doing, right? People whose first name starts with an R are always trouble. That was a blanket statement. But do you see what's there? Do you see what's there? It's from birth we're born with this understanding that even the least bit of intentionality or design denotes an intelligence, that there's something there. My 4-year-old asked, who put that there? Like I didn't like brainwash my kid in religion. I wasn't like, the Bible is true, Bible is true, right? Like show pictures of atheists and shock him, like, don't, no, right? Like a biology textbook, we're like burning them at home. This is crap. Bible, crap. But my little 4-year-old just walks in and he goes, oh, geez, who did that? Now, again, it's anecdotal evidence, so you can't really take that as truth, but it's kind of the basis understanding. In fact, even in, there's this argument that goes like this, and it says, the complexity of the universe is here for one of 3 reasons. And this is known across every channel of science and astrophysics and cosmology and biology. It all follows. There's this, we all observe complexity in nature, right? We all do. And it doesn't matter if you go, well, it's not complex to me. Well, then you don't really understand nature. It's infinitely complex. Right now, for you to make sense of me, there's about 150 million different firings of neurons in your brain. There's more electrical connections in your brain than the county of Los Angeles combined for you to see that I'm here right now. And every time I make a noise, you translate it into the language that you were brought up in. And your name is nothing but a noise by which you turn around and go, what? But your brain's actually intaking through the lens. It's flipping it upside down. You are then putting color on me to understand what I'm wearing and what I'm doing. And then every time I'm doing that, your hippocampus and your cerebellum are listening to my words, and it's either saying, let's get rewarded for what he just said. Maybe that was a good feeling it brought us. Maybe that'll bring us conviction. Our frontal lobe is making decisions about what we're going to do with that conviction in every single second that you're sitting here. You're phenomenally complex. No one looks at your complexity and goes, what complexity? So the argument really goes like this. There's 3 different things that the complexity of our universe could be. It could either be necessity, it could be blind chance, or it could be design. And really no one argues with those 3 premises. So the argument goes like this. The complexity of our universe is either due to chance, necessity, or design. And one thing we know to be true about design is design denotes designer, always. In fact, I was reading The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and it says, if you think there's design in nature, he's an atheist, he said, if you think there's design in nature, if you want to be a scientist, you have to throw it out. You can't see it. You can't say there's patterns. Everything's a chance. So this argument is it's one of those three things. So the first one is, what if it's necessity? What if all of you see the things that are necessary for you to observe me right now? And that's just in your biology. We're not even going to touch about the reasons that you can exist and the reason that you can live. Let's just talk about what are the chances that our universe is built in such a way that life could ever exist in the first place? What are the odds that our universe would be a life-permitting universe? And we only got one chance to start that. Most astrophysicists would believe at a point about 13.88 to 13.75 billion years ago, there was an explosion. And that explosion began what's called the Space-Time Continuum. Those three things go in tandem with each other. You can't have space without time. You can't have time without space. And those things are working together. And it began this new thing that we know as time. 13 points. And before that, there was nothing. And in that moment, the complexity of the design of the whole entire universe and all the laws that govern the fact of gravity and the low entropy universe and the strong nuclear force and the way that the moons and the stars and everything goes around and the speed of light, which is set at such a perfect mile per hour so that it's able to keep all the constants like equals mc squared in check. In a blink of an eye, in a billionth of a trillionth of a second, at the moment of the Big Bang, all of those things were in place. So if you think to yourself, well, we had an infinite number of chances to get it right, you're wrong. One time, 13.75 billion years ago, there was one explosion that took place in a billionth of a trillionth of a second. To which one person named Stephen Hawking said, when you look at the way that our universe began, it has certain religious implications. One untrained would look at that and believe that there was design. Clearly, he said, I can see how people jump to religion. And that began everything that we know as the space-time continuum. And here we sit, billions of years later down the line. And so the argument is, well, what if it was just by chance? Well, let's start with the first one, which is easier. What if it was necessary? What if all of the complex numbers and everything, what if it had to be that way? Right? That's like if you're watching, let's say you're watching a sporting event, and let's say you're watching baseball, right? And this guy walks up to bat, and he's never played baseball before, and he doesn't know how to hold a bat, so he's holding it backwards, and he takes a swing, and he hits it out of the park, 3,000 feet out of the park. Just in case you're really unfamiliar with like baseball and physics, like 380 feet is a pretty normal outfield wall, 400 feet maybe at some of the deepest parts, at some of the deeper depending on what park you're in. The guy hits at 3,000 feet. The idea of, well, what if the universe had to look this way? What if it needed to be perfectly like this? What if it made itself to be that way is the same thing as making the argument, well, of course he hit at 3,000 feet. He had to because he did. Therefore, he must have. Therefore, he had to. Therefore, it was necessary. That doesn't make any sense. In fact, the only things that are necessary in our universe are ideas, like numbers, right? Numbers are necessary things. If I told you to hold 3 in your hand, what would you do? You might hold 3 on your hand, but just hold 3 in your hand. What does it absolutely beg when I say hold 3 in your hand? What are you going to ask me? 3 what? The ideas, like the laws of logic, are necessary. These are what we mean by necessary things. But are the laws of our universe necessary? Does the speed of light have to be set perfectly that way? Couldn't it be 1 mile an hour less or 1 mile an hour more? Yeah, it could. So it's actually not necessary. So we cancel that one out. Almost everyone cancels it out. It doesn't make any sense. Then we get to the next one, and people go, oh, well, I'm not going to the designer. I'm not willing to go there. This is where I was. I think it was by chance. And maybe you've made this argument before. You say, Chris Oken, there's 10 to the 22nd planets in our universe. 10 to the 22nd planets in our universe. There are as many planets in our universe as there are grains of sand on every seashore on planet Earth. And you want to tell me that there's something unique about the world that we live on? There's got to be millions of different planets that have it. There's 10 to the 22nd planets, for God's sakes. What would make you think there's anything unique about this? And what would then bring you from your head to your heart to think that someone's there caring about you? In fact, scientists would say there's 122 things that are necessary for you and I to be alive. 122 things. We call those anthropic principles. What anthropic principle is it means these are the things that are necessary to sustain life in our universe. If any one of these, and picture them as dials, 122 perfectly set dials, that if one of them was off, when I'm talking off, I don't mean like there's like 6 dials on it. I'm talking about most of these dials have hundreds of trillions of little tick marks, and they're all set to one mark on that dial. And if they were one mark to the right or one mark to the left, no life anywhere in the universe. There's 122 anthropic principles, anthropic coincidences that allow us to experience life in our universe. Right now, you're sitting on a ball that is primarily water. You're zipping through the universe at 67,000 miles an hour, while at the same time you're spinning in rotation at 1,000 miles an hour. But you're unaware of that because everything in your body has compensated for that, so you're just seeing me right now. But you're on this little blue orb that's zipping through the galaxies. You've got a big gaseous planet called Jupiter that's sucking up all the asteroids that ought to kill us. Any life-sustaining universe would have to have a giant gaseous planet to take it in. We're revolving around a red dwarf, a G2 red dwarf star. It's the perfect one. It has to be there to permit liquid water, which is actually necessary. We have to be carbon-based life forms. All these things have to be perfectly set in place. There's 10 to the 22nd planets in our universe. There's 10 to the 70th power atoms in our universe. If you don't know how small an atom is to an orange what an orange is to planet Earth. That's how small an atom is. And you take every bit of stardust and every planet volumetrically, there's 10 to the 70th power atoms in our universe. Okay, you get how small an atom is? Like if you picked up a hunk of dirt and I said, choose an atom randomly and pick the same one that I picked. You might be holding 1 trillion atoms even in your own hands. It's a remarkable number. And just when we start jumping in these big numbers, it's really easy to go, I don't know how much 1 billion is, right? Because it's just like, it's like 1 million, but there's a B in front of it. Let me give you some context as we start to talk about these big numbers. Here's what 1 billion is. 1 second is 1 second. That was meaningful. 1 million seconds is 2 weeks. 1 billion seconds is 30 years. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. That's a lot. I didn't need to tell you that. You can go to the next slide. In this orb that we're floating on, the universe is built so perfectly. The orb that we're on is tilted at 23.5 degrees on its axis. If it was 23.7 degrees, there'd be no life on planet Earth. 23.3 degrees, no life on planet Earth. The perfect tilt so that the seasons aren't too radical, that the temperature changes they're not so instrumental that they kill out all life or they freeze us over. In fact, we need earthquakes. Earthquakes, if you didn't know, are kind of like a cosmic salt shaker that moves all the sediment that has broken down in rocks back into the ocean and replenishes its supply. If we didn't have plate tectonics, there'd be no life on planet Earth. We need earthquakes. But if we had any more earthquakes, we would all die because too many earthquakes is a bad thing. If we didn't have any earthquakes, we would all die because there wouldn't be replenishment of the nutrients in our oceans and in our lakes. Also, the sun is 93 million miles away from planet Earth. 93 million miles away from planet Earth. It takes light from the sun 8 minutes to get here. If it was 94 million miles away, there'd be no life on planet Earth. If it was 92 million miles away, there'd be no life on planet Earth. It's perfectly set. The solar flares, the changing, the solar heat spots, everything is perfect so that we can experience life. Every single moment, hydrogen must convert 1/7,000th of itself from hydrogen to helium every second. Must convert 1/7,000th of itself every second for us to sustain life, for the cells in your body to continue living. And if those are off by 1 part in 1,000, in any given second of your life, you will experience a very painful death. But you didn't think about that tonight, right? You weren't like, come on, guys, keep it up. 1/7,000th, I said. You don't think about that. The odds of the nuclear dense force, the mass density of objects is set so perfectly, it's 1 in 10 to the 60th power. That means if it was just randomly set, there would be this dial that had 10 to the 60th notches on it, and it's perfectly set to one of those dials. Remember how many atoms there are in the universe? 10 to the 70th. For just one of the 122 dials, just one of them is already set at 1 in 10 to the 60th power. How many planets are in the universe? 1 in 10 to the 22nd power. That means with just one calculation, if you just took the mass density of objects, just that 1 in 10 to the 60th power, if just that knob, if there's only one knob necessary for all life to possibly be in our universe, if that one knob was all it was, there would still be an astronomical chance that there'd be no life anywhere if it was just that one knob. But there's not just one. There's 122. And each of those knobs looks just like that knob does. The gravitational force of our universe is 1 in 10 to the 40th power. Our universe is 14 billion light years across. 14 billion light years across. Light travels at about 1 billion kilometers every second. Here's what's crazy about these numbers. Just the gravitational force. You get it? If the gravitational force was any stronger, then every single cell in your body would implode on itself and everyone would die. That would suck. If the gravitational force of our universe was any weaker, then everyone would just start separating and floating away. And we would combust just like that. And if you put a ruler that was as wide as our universe is long, which is 14 billion light years across, if you don't know what a light year is, it's the distance that light travels in a calendar year. And light is fast. If you guys had like a gun and you put like a speed of light bullet in it and you said bang, by the time you finished the word bang, that bullet would have gone around the globe 7 times and hit you in the back of the head. 7 times. That's how fast light goes. It would take something traveling that fast 14 billion Earth years to get from one side of our universe to the other. If you put a ruler that extended the entire width of our universe, gravity is set at 1 inch on that ruler. And if you move it 1 inch to the left or 1 inch to the right, there'd be no life anywhere in our universe. Albert Einstein discovered something in 1917 when he discovered that there's a cosmological constant in our universe. In other words, why doesn't everything, if there's gravity, just smash in on itself after the Big Bang? After the big explosion, why didn't it just go? Well, because there's actually a counteraction to gravity called dark energy. And it's this weird thing that we don't understand. What we don't understand in science, we call it dark. It's a funny way of saying we don't freaking know. Dark energy, dark matter. 99% of our observable universe is dark energy and dark matter. So lest we get too high and mighty and go, science knows everything. 99% of the observable universe we call, I'm not quite sure what it is stuff. Now, is science important? You better believe it is. This isn't like an anti-science. And I think that's what we think. God's an anti-science God. It's not true. In fact, we need God for science. Because if any other worldview were in place, if everything was just haphazardly, then why would we measure it? If the old system of the gods ran everything, then why is there lightning? Well, because Zeus was pissed. We need this idea of a consistent, constant, immutable, never-changing God to do science in the first place. Otherwise, none of our results would be meaningful. When we say that the rate of falling inside of a vacuum is 9.8 meters per second, we're assuming that the next time I do that, what's it going to be? 9.8 meters per second. We are betting and banking on consistency that we have no right to guess towards. Unless, as the New Testament says, he upholds all things and keeps them working in perfect tandem. That cosmological constant at the moment that the Big Bang happened was set at 1 point in 10 to the 120th power. Now don't forget, there's 1 in 10 to the 70th atoms in our universe, in every single thing that's nuclear dense and everything made up of hundreds of millions of atoms. That's how many atoms are in the universe. And for just one of those dials, remember, you've got the mass density of objects is 1 in 10 to the 60th power. You've got the gravitational force is 1 in 10 to the 40th power. You've now got this cosmological constant, which is 1 in 10 to the 120th power. The odds in the first place of us living in a low entropy universe where any of this is even meaningful is 1 in 10 to the 138th power raised to the 12th power. We're not even going to touch that dial yet. How many dials are there? 122. When you need more than one dial to be in place for there to be life, when you start doing these numbers, this is 1 in 10 to the 60th, this is 1 in 10 to the 120th, this is 1 in 10 to the 40th power, this is 1 in 10 to the 138th raised, or 138th raised to the 12th power. When you need all those to be consistent in order for there to be life, what do you have to do with them? To multiply them together, don't you? It's 1 in 10 to the 60th multiplied by 1 in 10 to the 40th, multiplied by 1 in 10 to the 120th, multiplied by 1 in 10 to the 138th, raised to the 12th. You have to multiply all that crap together. And at the moment that the Big Bang happened, all of those things were in place so perfectly that if you want to argue the idea of chance in our universe, you have to say that those numbers, which are they're not even astronomical, they're laughable. They're not even real numbers. We don't even know what to do with them. Like when you've superseded the amount of atoms in the universe, how do you start counting? Like what do you count anymore? We're not talking about atoms, we're talking about subatomic particles. We can't even count it. In fact, let me give you an idea of just two of those numbers. If you just took the gravitational force and if you just took the cosmological constant and you took the gravitational force, just two of the 122 dials. Let me give you a visual of this. If you stood on the moon and you had a dart, and the tip of your dart was the size of an atom, and we put a target on planet Earth that was the size of an atom, and we blindfolded you on the moon, like you do, and you took that dart and you chucked it at Earth blindfolded. Remember, it's spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour while zipping through at 67,000 miles an hour, and you blindfolded just chucked that dart at Earth. And let's say you missed, just perchance. Your atom-sized tip missed the atom-sized target. The odds of you hitting that, just hitting that target by itself, are 1 in 10 to the 37th power. Just hitting it one time. Now, let's say I gave you like an infinite number of tries. And let's say on try number 436,417,412,000,003,077, you hit it. And you went, yes! First try, right? You're just like, nailed it. You go, see, I told you this universe could exist by just chance alone. We don't need anyone to intervene. I would go, okay, sorry to ruin your party, but a few things you need to remember. Number one, you only get one shot, right? Like Eminem, you only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow, because opportunity comes once in a lifetime. Okay, that's neither here nor there. Secondly, in order for you to understand just those two numbers, you would have to hit that target again 67 trillion times in a row without missing once.
Good luck.
It's just not going to happen. And if you miss one time, you got to start the whole process over. But remember, you didn't have an infinite number of tries. It's not the monkeys typing in, have you heard that, like the Kafka, right? Well, if monkeys sit in a room and keep typing, they'll eventually produce the works of William Shakespeare. That's actually not true. It's not a thing. The odds of something can be 0. And when you start taking these numbers, you start multiplying them together, you can go to the next one. Here's what you also need to understand. The numbers that I just gave you were from 2007. In 2001, people believed that the odds of having a life-permitting universe by chance were 1 in 10,000. Astrophysicist Hugh Ross did the calculations, and he said if you took the actual number and you divided it by all the planets in our universe, the number would still come out to about 1 in 10 to the 140th power raised to the 16th power. But that was in 2011. And every 6 months, as astrophysics grows and science grows, the probability of a life-permitting universe happening by chance without a designer, the odds of it happening by chance decrease about 1 billion times every 6 months. In the year 2011, the Anthropic Principles had jumped from 122 to 202. You can keep going. In 2018, we realized something called the longevity constant in astrophysics, and now there's 393 anthropic coincidences or anthropic principles. So we don't have 122 dials anymore. Remember, with just 4 of them, we made it completely impossible, and now you got to do 122 of those things, and every year, it's getting 1 billion times less possible for this to have happened by chance. To the point where, the numbers it's not really funny anymore, right? 1 in 10 to the 282nd power raised to the 12th power. It was a waste of time to write that down, because that's not. People would say, at the craziest, farthest chance, mathematical impossibility is 1 in 10 to the 50th power. That's mathematical impossibility. We're talking about numbers 1 in 10 to the 282nd power raised. That exponent is raised to an exponent power of 12. When someone who wants to argue for the design hypothesis starts to look at a life-permitting universe, one of the crazy things that happens is when you start to ask those questions, they're not comfortable with that math either. So they start to go to other theories like, well, maybe there's a multiverse, which all it does is it sets all the arguments back a step, because the multiverse says, well, what if there's an infinite number of universes out there and we're just one of those universes? Well, still, these 3 guys, Board, Blanken, and Guth, came up with this theory that said if any universe, which is on average expanding, had to have a point in which everything began, so if there's a multiverse, it would still be expanding, it would still have to have a point where it all began, and that point would still have to have all the life-permitting things that this universe would have to have for us to have life. So it's called M theory, or the multiverse theory. It actually doesn't change anything. When you just do the simplest bit of asking, you got to go, okay, so you think that there's something out there that's just spitting out universes because your evidence is, the backing of this is, we actually jump outside of science. Here's what Sir Frederick Hoyle, atheist astrophysicist, says about this. He says, when you look at the data, it seems like a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and astronomy and everything else in order to permit the life that we see here. I love how Stephen Hawking put it. There are clearly religious implications. I want to read this other one for you. This conclusion of a divine creator is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could, said David Thaler, the head of research at the University of Basel in Switzerland. In fact, at Stephen Hawking's 70th birthday party, he hired these most brilliant astrophysicists to give a State of the Universe address. And they did all of their research. They got a huge grant, and so they're at his 70th birthday party, which must have been a real hoot. And they got up, and they stood there, and they said, all of our research has led us to this conclusion. We have once again arrived at the very sticky discourse of how the universe could possibly come to be without a jump start from a transcendent creator. That was their conclusion. And these aren't religious people. And when you start to look at this and you start going, well, maybe it was chance. One of the leading theories out there, in fact, because the chance is so improbable, there's an idea called panspermia, which is as gross as it sounds. But what they're saying is, well, maybe we live in a certain plane of understanding and existence, and what if there's a different plane of existence where there are creatures in that universe that found a way through their super intellect to jump into our universe, and they put life on crystals, and they put those crystals on planet Earth, and that's why there's life. But listen, that's not a joke. That's one of the leading theories. Now, the point isn't to ridicule or to criticize. The point is to ask a much deeper, more pertinent question for us as people. When the book of Romans says, from the beginning of the world, God's invisible qualities and his divine nature have been clearly seen from what has been made, so that man is without excuse. I think over and above, and this is just one argument for God's existence, right? One of my other things that I do, I'm an apologist, so I go and I'll go to different colleges and I'll discuss the idea of God's existence with them. But it's a ministry because I want people to believe, because this is what I needed to believe. And some of you don't need this. Some of you are like, God said it, I read it, that finishes it, move on to worship. Pulfer, get up there, right? From the head to you're like, just get off the stage. Who cares, right? Like, get the blonde kid off the stage, move on to worship. But you have to remember this. You're also speaking perhaps in a season of hope and joy in your life. 3 years ago when I found out that my best friend was killed in combat in Afghanistan, everything that I felt about God was different. The provider didn't provide. My God of love felt distant. And sometimes in those moments where our head just doesn't want to get in, our heart doesn't want to get into it, our head has to rescue us in different seasons and just go, God, I don't get it. I don't get this. I don't feel like you love me. I don't feel like you're good. But God, I know that you're here, and I know that you're near, and I know that you love me. And this is just, again, one of these arguments. It's called the Teleological Argument. There's 10 other ones that I could give to you. We just don't have time. But I think I walked in going, well, God wants us to check our brain at the door, and then what I found was the evidence for a creator, right? That's the third part of it. Necessity doesn't work, design. If you're willing to believe, even dividing everything by, and that's already assuming we're allowed to have a low entropy universe, which is the set of laws that would be in place. That's the longevity principle, that those would all stay the same over time. If we just give all those to you and say, fine, you can borrow those, the odds are still 1 in 10 of the 282nd power raised to the 12th power. And no one's comfortable with that, which means if you nix out number 1, you nix out number 2, then you're left with the third part of that axiom. That axiomatic phrase says, if it wasn't design and if it wasn't necessity, then it has to be, or if it wasn't chance and it wasn't necessity, then it has to be design. Design denotes intelligence, and intelligence begs for an intelligence that must be, if the space-time continuum were the beginning of all of the universe, then what are we looking for? If the space-time continuum was the beginning of all space, time, and matter, then we can't have anything that made it that was space, time, or matter, which means we're searching for someone who's super intelligent, who is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Read the book. God's qualities. Our God, it says, he's not bound by time like we are bound by time. It says that God has no form like man. He is not bound by matter. Space, time, material. He's an immaterial God. Thousands of years after this book is written, we are now giving people Nobel Prizes for coming to the conclusion that maybe a God made it who is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. And I wonder if God's going, like Alice, you know? Remember Alice? Hey, what are you guys looking for? There's this lady, she went missing. Can't find her anywhere. How are you looking for her? I don't know. We got this description. We got what people told us she was like. We've been looking everywhere for her. Seems like she's hiding somewhere. No? In fact, if I may, see how I put here that I've made it plain to you since the oh, you don't care? Okay. I'm right here. Okay. Have you looked at the ocean recently? Shh, we're trying to find Alice. You heard that before? If only God would reveal himself to me. I'm right here. Shh, searching for God. He does not look like you. I'd argue he looks exactly like me. Hold on. I'm going to go in the ocean. Okay. I'm there too. I made that. In fact, Psalm 91 says you're going to realize a lot about who I am if you go in the ocean. You see, what if everything that God made was this analogy that we've missed? And we can get all puffed up with the knowledge of it. We can walk out and go, like intellectual gluttony, like, yeah, look at all these freaking numbers I learned tonight. This is awesome. I'm going to go tell my friends about numbers. Who cares? Nowhere in Scripture does God desire believers. God's call is for surrender. So you go, well, if God's up there, then why doesn't he just reveal him? Just show up, big talking head, rah, 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 I am God. Show up right here in this place, and we'd all believe that you existed. To which God responds in Scripture, I don't care if you believe in me. Would it lead to you bowing your knee and worshiping me? Your cognitive assent to the fact that there might be a God up there doesn't save anyone. There's nowhere in Scripture where God goes, oh, cool, I proved that I'm already here. What joy would there be for a God who goes, I finally did it. They know I'm here. Especially when God said, I've already done it. And y'all aren't going to know it for a while. But as soon as your astrophysics catches up with how intelligent I am, every 6 months you're going to find it's 1 billion times less likely that I don't exist. 1 billion times every 6 months. In the book of Jeremiah, it says, when we go in the ocean, we see the power of the hand of God. When we see the sky, we see the majesty of who he is. Jeremiah actually says that God stretches out the heavens. Do you know how crazy of a concept that was until we discovered that the universe is actually stretching out like a tent? God goes, I'm stretching it out. We're going, well, that's not how the universe works. Oh, it turns out it's exactly how it works. God goes, I know, I made it. God says in the book of Isaiah, it says that the winds blows in cyclones, this cyclonic nature. It moves in this rotation, and we didn't know that. We just discovered that in the last 200 years. We didn't know. We thought that just blew across the plains like this. And it says in the Bible that it moves in these rotations. In the Old Testament, God says, I want you to combine these things, this scarlet wool. I want you to combine oil and all these things and put them together. And if someone touches a dead body, I want them to go into this concoction that you build. And you read it and you go, ooh, he's like a witch. We took that concoction, and now today we call it lye, which is the main ingredient in soap. And thousands of years before anyone's going to discover, when Pasteur is going to start delivering babies after he's operating on corpses and realizing, we're losing a lot of women. They're all dying to infection. I don't understand why. God's going, I said, if you touch a body, wash your hands. And Pasteur wins the stupid prize for going, after we touch bodies, dead ones, let's wash our hands before we insert our hands that have been touching dead bodies into the wounds and open sores of both women and men. What if we did that? And we went, this guy is so smart. These French people get it. And God's going, I told you how to make soap 2,000. Okay. Did you know the universe is stretching? I already said, okay. It moves in cycle. He says that there's mountains under the surface of the ocean. We went, there's no mountains. Oh, there are a ton of mountains under the surface. Okay. He talks about the mystery of the deep. Did you know we know more about space than we do about our own oceans? But here's the thing I'm saying. First of all, what if Alice has been next to you the whole time? What if, as Scripture says, God's kindness and his majesty is there to lead us to repentance? And we walk around and we just go, tree, water, sand. But really, what if it's God going, you see that ocean right there? I want to give you an analogy. Here's what I'm going to make this ocean like. And every time you go in it, you're going to remember all these characteristics of me. Here's what it says. Creation revealed God's character. And we walk into the ocean and God goes, here's what ocean's going to be like for these people. I'm going to make it powerful. Tons and tons of force pushing up against the shores. When you go stand against a wave and you just take it like, oh, I'm going to take, you just eat it, right? No one's ever like, I'm going to take this wave on, right? Like, it doesn't happen. If you're the best surfer in the world, right? When you start watching those big Mavericks that they ride over, you're just like, that is the craziest thing I've ever seen, okay? Y'all all got to be high. Like, who does it? Who's like, I'm going to get on this massive wave towards I don't understand. That's crazy to me. Because the power of the ocean, the treachery of the ocean, God goes, I want you to understand my power. Oh yeah, I'm going to put the power into the ocean. When you swim in it and you feel it and you understand it, I want you to know that if that ocean is that powerful and it screams about who I am, that I'm bigger than your issues, and I'm bigger than your mistakes, and I'm more powerful than your brokenness, and I'm bigger than your insecurities. Go in the ocean and feel the weight of my character, of the power of my majesty. And then, when you sit on the shores and you watch the waves crashing in over and over again, and it just consistently does that, and it never ceases, ever, it just consistently, I want you to remember that that's my forgiveness for you. My mercy is new every morning. But don't just stand there and go, waves are cute. Waves are all about God. It says in the book of Psalms, it says, all of creation screams of the glory and character of who he is. What if you are an analogy for God? Because you are. You are called the Imago Dei. You are the very image bearer of God, whether you know it or not. And you go into the depth of the ocean and God says, how deep is my mystery and how deep is my love for you? As far as the heavens are above the earth, to the deepest part of the ocean, you wouldn't even understand how much I love you. I love you more than you love yourself. I know every hair on the head. I know every grain of sand on the seashore. And you think that your problems are too insignificant for me to understand? You sit and listen. We take ocean sounds and we go to sleep to them. Why? I wonder if it's the beckoning of God's peace going, it's me, you need your rest in me, it's me. And we've just gone, oh, it looks like an ocean to me. And God's going, it's a big blue analogy of me. You look at a tree leaf and you see all the intricate designs on it. It's a big green analogy of who I am. And whatever skin color you are in here, you are a that colored analogy of God. The communicable attributes of who God is. You love, you want to be loved, you understand. We get this sense of justice and mercy and grace and all those things working in tandem together. You are an analogy for God. And perhaps we've walked through this earth. We've walked past the impossibility of this creation. We've walked outside and looked at the stars and seen the majesty of who he is. And we wake up and the sun blinds us and we worry about putting on our sunglasses before we think about that. That thing, the heat that I'm feeling is 8 minutes old. And when we watch the sunset 8 minutes ago. It just hasn't even gotten to us yet because it's perfectly 93 million miles away from where we are in that moment. And what if everything is just God saying, you don't think I love you? I painted it on your stars. I wrote it in the seashore. I know you. And I've made the chance of everything being that way by pure chance so astronomically crazy that you would stop begging and going, well, maybe I'm not significant. But do you understand this? If there is a God, then you were made on purpose, by purpose, for a purpose. Any lie you tell yourself that you don't matter, it's not your call anymore. Because you didn't make you. When my 4-year-old gets a little thing of Play-Doh and he makes something and he says, look what I made. And I go, what is that? He's like, it's a truck. I'm like, doesn't look like a truck to me. If I brought the most intelligent art sculpturist in the world in there and I said, what does it look like to you? And again, probably French, he'd be like, I think it's this. You want to know who the authority is on that? Who's right about what my son made? My son, my 4-year-old, pees his pants in bed son, is the reigning, universal, international authority on every piece of Play-Doh that kid drops out of his hands. And if he makes a goose that looks exactly like a goose, but he says it's not a goose, then it's not, because he made it. Which means if God formed you and you don't think you've got purpose, it's not your opinion. Doesn't matter. You were made on purpose, by purpose, for a purpose. And if you want to know what that purpose is, Romans 12 tells us. We're going to get to that in a few weeks. At this rate, a few years. Therefore, as dearly loved children, as deep as the ocean, as wide as the expanse of the 14 billion light year across universe. And guess what? And it says that God's love is deep for us. It's wider than the heavens. Did you know that the universe is actually expanding? It's getting bigger right now. At a rate of 68 kilometers per second per megaparsecond, the universe is actually getting bigger right now. It's expanding. Isn't that an incredible picture of his love for us? It's just getting bigger. You are one loved, purposed analogy of the creator of our universe. You are not a mistake. You are not an accident. You are not just some bag of plasma that happened to be. And it is high time that we, as the image bearers of God, surrender our life, our time, our talents, our resources, our sin, our brokenness over to the one who said, I built you, I formed you, I knit you together in your mother's womb. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You bear my image. I have a purpose for your life, for you were made on purpose, by purpose, for purpose. Now, if we stop there at the facts, then we're going to stop at the head. But the movement of this whole series is we got to move from head to heart. That if that's who God is and that's who you are, then there's nothing better that our hands can do than to surrender our life over to him and say, God, just show me the purpose. You are powerful. You are creative. You are intricate. You are majestic. You are deep. And you've been standing next to me this whole time. How did I miss you? And God goes, my kindness leads to repentance. Would you repent? Would you worship? And that's what we're going to do in this time. We're going to have Andrew and the gang come back up and lead us in a couple songs to close out to make sure that head knowledge moves from a cognitive assent that maybe there's a God to our heart which says, this God made me on purpose, by purpose, for a purpose. And the beginning of that purpose, the beginning of knowledge of God is the fear of him. And to say, God, I am yours. I am all yours. And if you're sitting here in this room tonight and you go, maybe it's been a cognitive assent, or maybe it wasn't even that before you walked in here and you go, but now I'm ready. Then I'm going to ask you in this moment, would you just pray with me? If you've never given your life over to Jesus and said, that's it, I surrender, head and heart, it's all yours. Would you pray with me?